Hello, how are you? Good. I have returned again for another boredom lockdown ramble. That's about cars, I suppose. Um, Hopefully it's slightly better than last time. I actually have my microphone plugged in, so hopefully the sound quality is a little bit better. And maybe the lighting might be slightly improved. Unfortunately, I'm not an influencer as much as I would love to get paid for doing nothing as they do. So I don't have one of those light ring things that they use to make themselves look gorge. Anyway, enough talking bullshit. Let's talk cars, shall we? So I suppose firstly, what we should talk about is Lotus. Lotus announced last week, I think it was, that they're finally going to stop making the Lotus Elise as well as the Exige and the Evora. The Elise, I think, is celebrating 25 years this year, and so like they're finally actually stopping making it and making cars that are based around that same chassis they've been using for the last 25 years. Quite sad, I suppose. The Elise is a pretty good car, but it's time for change now that they have Chinese ownership, Geely. Hopefully they can do good things for them. So that means they've relaunched final editions of each of those cars, which is great because, as we all know, Lotus love a special edition, and there's probably more special edition Lotus cars than there are special edition original minis and new minis at that. Yeah, it's just, all the trinkets, fully spec'd cars for a slightly knocked down price than if you ticked all the boxes on the configurator. It'll be interesting. They're bringing out a brand new car this year. I can't remember what it was nicknamed. The T130 or something like that. Which I think it's been hinted that it's going to be first a new Esprit, which would be great to see the Esprit name back. But it'll probably be a modular architecture in years to come. Who knows? Let's watch this space. For anyone that cares about pickup trucks, I know I certainly don't really. Ford have released the new F-150 Raptor, and I'll admit the F-150 Raptor is pretty cool. If anyone's not familiar with the F-150 Raptor, it's an F-150, the largest selling vehicle in the entire world, and they just turned the volume up to 11. Fox dual shocks on the suspension all round. It's got the V6 EcoBoost engine producing silly amounts of horsepower. I think in this new one that they're releasing, it's going to be somewhere in the 500s and stupid amount of torque. Everything's beefed up, so basically you can jump over sand dunes and hit the ground as hard as you can and just keep going, unless you're this guy. But that was the previous generation F-150 Raptor, so maybe he can try it again in this one and see if he succeeds. Ridiculous car. It wouldn't work in Europe, but if you live in the United States, worth a punt maybe. Then in slightly unforeseen news, the Cupra Formentor, which was released a couple of weeks ago, and all the journos have been driving it. It's a new car. It's the first proper standalone car from the Seat sub-brand Cupra. We won't get into that story. And from what I can tell, from what I've read and what I've seen, it's a pretty decent car. It's basically just a jumped up Golf 4 on stilts. But what they're going to do now is put the 5-cylinder Audi engine into it, which is always good. More cylinders are always a good thing. No one expected that to come along. So it'll be slightly quicker than the one that we already have, and it will sound better. And who knows, maybe we'll get that 5-cylinder engine in a Cupra Leon, say it, Leon, you know what I'm trying to say. But anyway, yeah, more cylinders. It's going to be called the VZ5. Now, normally I don't like talking about cars that are for sale, not on the island of Ireland, but PistonHeads just threw up two BMWs, somewhat similar. They're both estate cars, technically performed estate cars at a stretch, for in and around the same money. The first one is an Alpina B3. I lean on either side of the fence with Alpina sometimes. Some of them I think are great, some of them I think are a bit bleh. This one, this B3, it's got 180,000 miles in it, and whoever decided to put gold Alpina stickers, because they're aftermarket as well, on this car, must have been smoking crack because they look awful, but you could always take them off. 180,000 miles, it's really showing its wear on the inside too for 8,995. Seems like a bit of a stretch. It's not even the manual, it's a slush box. If you don't like the look at that though, another one they had during the week on Piston Heads was an E61 5 Series silver SE spec estate. Could be any 520D you see every day of the week. Except it's a 550i, which means it's a V8. Which is strange to see in non-M Sport guys. It's similar money to that Alpina, it's 8,990. It also has quite a few miles and it's got 140,000 miles. But who doesn't want a 360 brake horsepower V8 sleeper and an estate sleeper at that? Brave to take on either of those two. If I had to choose one, I'd go for the E61. But unfortunately, I can't afford to do either of those things. Small bit of motorsport news. I won't go too long because I know not everyone's mad into motorsport. The big story, which broke today, finally, is that world champion, 7-time world champion, should I say, Sir Lewis Hamilton, has finally signed his Mercedes contract for 2021. Apparently it's only a 1-year deal. They haven't gone into much more details than that. Here's hoping he does as great as he is. Look, I'm not a Lewis Hamilton fan, but I will appreciate he is an incredible racing driver. But him winning everything is becoming incredibly dull. It says a lot from me, who was a Ferrari fan in the Schumacher days. But even now, Mercedes and Hamilton have surpassed that record and period of boredom from the early millennium. So yeah, 1 year, maybe he gets one more title. That means he'll be the most successful racing driver on paper and possibly be never beaten. And then he can piss off into retirement and do all the other crap that he seems to indulge himself in. And that's just, let's bring on a new era. There'll be new regulations in 2022, start afresh, and we can all have a great time. No offense, Lewis Hamilton. I know he has his fans, but he's had his run. Let's get some fresh blood in there. In other motorsport news, Peugeot have announced their lineup for the 2022 World Endurance Championship. They're going to be returning to the world of endurance racing, including Le Mans in 2022. They haven't said exactly when in 2022 they're going to start. Maybe they'll start at Le Mans. Anyway, they're coming back. They have previous at Le Mans. They did it in the early 90s, 1990 to 1993 in the Peugeot 905, which was a cool looking car. They won in 91 and in 92 with that car. I think, don't quote me on that again. Fantastic looking car. Then they returned in the millennium. This time I think it was from 2005 to 2009 in the Peugeot 908 HDI FAP. Another great looking Le Mans car. They managed to win twice with that one too. I think 07 and 09, or possibly 07 and 08. But then world financial crisis, they pulled out. But they're back anyway. They're going to be back in 2022. And they have a raft of very talented racing drivers that they have announced. So they're going to have 2 previous Formula 1 drivers, Paul di Resta, who drove for Force India and briefly for Williams. He's a Sky Sports pundit, so you might know him from there. Kevin Magnussen, who was with Haas up until this season and has just started an endurance racing program with Cadillac in America. He'll be joining Peugeot. Jean-Eric Vergne, Formula E champion, and has also been driving in LMP2, and a former Toro Rosso Formula 1 driver. They have Loic Duval, who again has a illustrious career in endurance racing. He was quite successful with Audi back in the day. And they also have James Rossiter and Mikael Jensen and Gustavo Mendes, again, all glittering careers in endurance and sports car racing. So it should be interesting. Peugeot back in motorsport is always cool. French make cool cars, and when they make sporty cars, they're even cooler again. So let's hope it all works out for Peugeot. Enough motorsport news. Now we're going to turn to our outside broadcaster, me, to discuss, is it possible to actually buy a really bad car? Can a car be that bad that you'd rather not have any car at all? Let's find out. So, Is it truly possible to have a bad car? I suppose it really depends on what your definition of bad is. Take, for example, my mother, who owns this car. She thinks this is brilliant. It's easy to drive. It's very well appointed. It's got climate control, which is good in a day like this because the trip computer is currently saying it's 2 degrees outside. It's got a radio that is automatically tuned to Radio 1 as soon as you turn it on. It's got electric windows. It's got automatic headlights and wipers, so she has to do pretty much nothing. It's got parking sensors, which will at least warn her that she's about to hit something. So everything that she needs it for, it does absolutely perfectly. Then you take someone like myself, or probably all of you who are watching this video, who truly, truly love cars and driving. Well, then it's not so great. This steering, well, it is moving the car, as you can see, but it doesn't feel like it's actually physically connected to anything in the car. The brakes are incredibly grabby. If I touch them, I almost kill myself, which kind of defeats the purpose of brakes somewhat. I suppose it is pretty practical. It's got a decent sized boot. Even in this current driving position, my driving position for someone who's ridiculously tall, I can fit in the back. It has a nice captain chair armrest here for when you're cruising. It is quite loud. Like we're only doing 40 kilometers an hour at the moment, and the road noise is quite high. You take this on a motorway, and things get pretty unbearable pretty quickly. I've driven this car to Galway and back, and you're tired just from the mental stress of constant buzzing in your ear. What else about it? It's not that economical. It's currently averaging 6.4 litres per 100 kilometers an hour. Old money, I think it's about 40, which is okay, I suppose. I suppose the biggest problem that this Micra has is the previous car my mother owned, which was another one of these Nissan Micras. It was a pre-facelift silver one, and it was actually the car that I had access to most when I was in college. And that car and this car had one major difference. I'll demonstrate that now with an audio effect. So imagine you're cruising along on a motorway, or you come up behind a tractor. You need to overtake someone. So, you're currently sitting at 2000 RPM, you flick on your indicator, and then you put your foot down. Now, in a manual car, is you drop a cog and you overtake, the revs build gradually, and although this is not a quick car, you will eventually get by. That noise you heard is because this Nissan Micra is equipped with the CVT automatic gearbox, which for my stupid brain and for the layman, basically it's a 1-gear automatic gearbox, and it changes the engine speed to increase the power. And it's awful. It's awful. The previous Nissan Micra that my mother owned, that I used quite a bit, was a manual car, and the difference in the driving experience was just marked. So as I've said, the steering has no feel, the brakes are crap, it's got very soft suspension, it's not fast. But with the manual gearboxes, you could squeeze every inch of power and potential out of that car, and it was not a car I would choose to buy, but you could still have a good time driving it. And this car I would prefer to walk. So back to the original question, is there such thing as a bad car? So much so that no car would be better than a bad car? Well, probably not. A car will always give you, the freedom to go wherever you want when we're not living in a pandemic. And so that freedom, the joy of the tactility of driving. So yeah, any car is better than no car. Just, if you're going to do it, just make sure you spec the right gearbox. So with that, back to the studio. Oh fuck. Thank you, John. that John, he's a great reporter, illustrious future career ahead of him. Great work. I'm a big admirer of his career. So returning to those two strange high mileage estate cars that we saw from Pistonheads earlier, is there any alternatives for similar money that you could get on the island of Ireland that would maybe interest you in the same way that those Curios would have? Now, I did put my criteria down into fast estate cars, but this being Ireland, there really wasn't much choice. So I've gone for a few different options. The first one is a 2001 CL500. It's missing a cap off the front bumper. It's not got its original wheels, so they might be OEM, modern OEM Mercedes wheels. They do suit it. I do think the CL is a fantastic looking car. Not got the greatest reliability record, I'll give you that much. But this one does only have 106,000 kilometers on it. And it's for sale at a dealership for €8,950. So it's a big saving on those cars in the UK. Now, if you don't want a coupe, I've got something a little more practical for you and a little more bulletproof. This is a W140 S-Class. Now this is only the 3.2 petrol. And it's got 133,000 miles in it, but it is NCT'd until August. And it's a W140 S-Class. What more could you want from a car? It'll literally do everything. And will probably outlive you. Expensive to run, and if something does break, but hey, it's cool. You can pretend you're a mob boss from the early 90s. And this last one I have, okay, it doesn't really match any of the previous ones for practicality, but it will certainly put a smile on your face when it comes to driving fun. It's a 2005 Porsche Boxster S with only 38,000 miles on the clock for €13,950. It's in blue. It's got the nice split rim alloys, black leather interior, at a dealership. If I had the money, I'd be very, very tempted by that car myself. So if you have 14 grand to spare, there is a beautiful Boxster S waiting for you in Wexford. Get on it. Oh, I didn't mention the price of that. That W140 S-Class is up for 7 grand. Come on, consumer advice. My classified find of the week, €2,600, 80,000 miles. There's no mention of NCT because as much as they've tried to block out the plates in the pictures in the ad, you can see it was originally on UK plates. Now they say it has been registered since, but this is a Citroen ZX Estate. It's the 1.4 petrol, so it'll be slow. But look at it, it's cool. It's got red stripes on it, which I'm sure, you know, some sort of special edition. It's got a backwards Citroen sticker in the rear window. Yeah, I think that's just a fantastically cool car. There's a winter hack, although, well, if you look at the weather outside, technically it's spring now. I think that's just a fabulous car. You know, again, what more could you really want? I have been able to have a look at the UK registration website just to see if there's any information on that UK reg they tried to block out. It's sworn off the road, so that might be okay. That means it's maybe because it was exported. It did say the NCT expired back in 2016. Sorry, the MOT expired back in 2016, January 2016. Again, maybe because it was imported here. But if you do go to look at that Citroen ZX Estate, which is also in Wexford. So if you're going to have a look at that Porsche Boxster S, go have a look at this Citroen ZX as well, and maybe you'll get a 2-for-1 deal. That's all I have for you today. I'm sure I'll be back again because we're still many weeks away from living in a non-lockdown world. So until then, stay safe, stay well, God bless. Okay, bye.